Before knowing how to use the XML HTTP request object, first try to think about what functionality do we need. We need to be able to make a connection to a URL, correct? And we should be able to tell which HTTP method is to be used, whether we are using the GET method or the POST method. Then in case we use the POST method, we should be able to pass the form data to the URL, correct? And if we make an asynchronous call to the server, we will not know when the result will be available to us. So we should be able to pass a callback function which will get executed when the result is available. And it is in this callback function that we may want to change the DOM tree or styles of certain HTML elements. So let's see how to use this XML HTTP request object. Let me first comment out this existing script code and write a new script tag. Now let us create a new pictures array which is empty. And this time we are not hard coding it. Rather, we will read the data from a local file Ajax style. Let's also write a load function because onload here wants to call the load function, and I will keep it empty for now. Now I want to get the pictures data, that is the list of image URLs from a URL. So basically the URL is of a website containing the HTTP protocol. But because we are not concerned about the web server and the backend part in this course, we can read that data from a local file. I have attached the relevant files in the downloads tab. So let's write a function and name it getPictures. And this function is supposed to get pictures Ajax style. So first we create an XML HTTP request object and then call the open method. The open method takes the first parameter as the HTTP method string, which can be get, post, put, etc. This tells the request object which HTTP method is to be used to send the HTTP request. The second parameter is the URL to which the request will be sent to. And the third parameter tells if the request is to be sent asynchronously. Most of the times we want it to be asynchronous so that the network HTTP call is non-blocking and JavaScript application or the page continues to do what it was doing until the response comes back to the browser, which can be handled through a callback function. In case we want the request to be blocking, we can set this parameter to be false. But that's not what we usually do. Network requests should almost all be asynchronous. Alright, then we need to register the callback function, which needs to be called when the request object has got the content from the server. In our case, we don't have any server. We are just using a file name pictures.json in the same directory as the HTML file. That's why we are using the relative URL, so that in case you host these files over a web server, you need not change the URL in the JavaScript code. So the callback function can be registered with the request object using the onload property. Basically, we are telling the request object that when the content is loaded, call this function. And the function itself can optionally take the event as a parameter, which is XML HTTP request progress event. And we will not get into that. Inside this function, we can parse the content into the pictures array. And we can get the content using response text property of the XML HTTP request object. So now the pictures global variable contains the array of image URLs. Alright. What should we do after that? Well, like we called change pic earlier on page load to display the first picture, here also we need to call change pic with 0 as argument. Let me copy paste the change pick function that was written earlier. We can also register a callback function in case there is an error. And this is an important thing because if something goes wrong, especially when you are making a network call, we need to tell the user. So we can register another callback method on error. And for now, we can just alert the user that something went wrong. In a real production level code, we will do something more sophisticated in case an error occurs. And finally, after registering the callbacks, we need to call the send method on the XML HTTP request object, which is responsible for actually making the HTTP request. After the response is available, the onload callback function will be invoked, which will start the slideshow. Alright? If you run this on Firefox, it should run perfectly fine. But on Chrome, by default, local file access is not granted due to cross-site scripting problem. If we were serving the JSON file and the HTML file through a web server like Tomcat, this problem will not happen in Chrome. But because I want to access it as a local file using the file protocol, it will not work in Chrome. So you can either use Firefox to test this part, or you can start the Chrome browser using the allow file access from files flag. I have attached a batch file in the download section. You will need to change the location of your Chrome exe according to your environment. You can also choose to run it from the console or shell. By the way, make sure that none of your previously opened Chrome windows are open when you run this. Otherwise, it may not work. So close the already opened Chrome windows, if any, and then execute this. Now, if we access the HTML file locally in the browser, we should be able to see the slideshow. Apart from the response text property, there are some other useful properties like status, which gives us the HTTP status code, which can be quite useful when getting data from a RESTful web service. You can search online to get more details on the XML HTTP request object and just play with it and its properties a little. Now, this was a simple example on how Ajax works, but you can also do a lot of other things like adding new HTML elements to the already existing DOM, etc., or removing some elements. The general structure of an Ajax application is that on page load, we fetch some data from the server. And we need not just fetch it from one single URL. If your page has multiple sections needing data from multiple URLs, we can do that. And then through the callback mechanism, we can make changes to the page by altering the DOM tree as required.